Hi guys, my name's Corey. Welcome to AuDHD Act 2, where we talk about things we can do today to better shape tomorrow. So today I want to talk to you about time blocking. Time blocking is one of the most common recommended productivity tools and methods to just kind of schedule and plan out your day. But I want to talk about why it's most likely not a great option for you if you're watching this channel. If you're on the spectrum, if you have any kind of issue with just long-term steady state work, then time blocking might be a challenge for you. So I want to go through why it may be difficult, what kind of challenges it might create for you, and I want to share a different option that's just worked a lot better for me. So let's jump right into it. So let's talk about the number one reason that time blocking isn't going to work for you is because you don't have a steady state of productivity. You don't start work at 9 and do the exact same amount of work per hour throughout every day until 5 o'clock. Like, that's just not how it works. If you're anything like me, you have extremely high intensity sprints and then periods of nothing, or periods of just thinking. Like, you achieve things in sprints. So this happens because we have peaks and valleys. People in general have peaks and valleys. This isn't just a neurodivergent on the spectrum thing. This is people in general, in nature, animals. All of us have peaks and valleys. We have times during the day where we naturally just are more active and more effective and more productive. And we have times during the day where we naturally want to rest. You can look into, sleep patterns, circadian rhythms, all of this stuff. There's a ton of science on it. But all you need to know is that you do have parts of your day that are primed to be more productive than other parts. And it's up to you to find out when, because it's not always the same. You'll hear people talk about the magic of like 5 a.m. waking up early and for some people, early in the morning is when they get a lot of important things done. For some people, the first part of the day, a lot of people have their most productivity in the first part of the day, like 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. before lunch kind of thing. A lot of people go way too heavy at lunch, and that's why they're not productive after lunch, but that's another story. So those peaks and valleys make it very, very difficult to maintain block schedule, because time blocking basically says from 10 a.m. to noon, you're going to do this. And it's something you put in place before. Like, it's something that you're telling yourself later that you're going to have to do. And so you don't really know what kind of state you're going to be in at that moment. If you have a good idea of what your daily, your rhythms are, where your peaks and valleys fall, you can probably use time blocking with some success. But the problem is when you show up to that block of time, you're in a different state of mind than you were when you blocked out that time. So time has passed, your mood has changed, things have happened, chemicals in your brain, food, all the different things, exercise levels, all of the different things that impact how you're feeling. All of those things have changed since when you first wrote down that block. So it's very difficult to predict what you're going to feel when the time block arrives. So that's the number one issue, is just an unpredictable, uneven productivity level. All right, so the number two thing on my list here for why time blocking is probably not going to work for you is context switching. Well, let me back that up. The number two thing is really a bunch of biological friction points, but the first one on that list is context switching. So context switching is basically like, let's say you're responding to emails, and then you have to go and jump into a meeting, and then you have to go and talk to a client. And all of those switches and those transitions, as most of you are aware, those are very, very taxing on the mind and on your executive function. And excuse me. So having time blocking where you're jumping from one block to another and it's scheduled and you're like, okay, time's up, I need to just go do this now. That does a couple of things that are bad for you. First off, it's going to kill any sprint momentum that you have. So you may be working on something much more important, or you may just be in the zone on something that is going to take you much longer later than it would now while you're in the zone, while you're in flow, in a state of flow. So putting the brakes on and saying, no, we're stopping right now because my block of time is over, is going to kill that momentum. It's also going to force you to transition into something else. And so both of those things are going to make it much more difficult to get that next task going. So that leads us into another important term, which is autistic inertia. So it's very common on the spectrum for people to have this inertia issue. Inertia is the things that at rest tend to remain at rest. Things in motion tend to remain in motion. It's law of physics. But inertia for autistic people and for people on the spectrum mean that if you haven't started a thing, getting started is the hardest part. Or on the other end, if you're full speed into a sprint, stopping is a very hard part. That's very taxing on your mind and on your system. And you have to be aware of that in order to operate at your best. Kirby, that's my tree, Kirby. And so you have to be aware of this to operate at your best and to know like the costs of starting and the costs of stopping. And that's not something that's easily calculated when you're looking at time blocking. You can't really do that in advance because you don't know when you're going to be in the flow. You can do things that help you get into the flow, but sometimes you just find yourself flying through a project and you have no idea why, but pumping the brakes isn't going to be helpful. You might as well use that momentum and put it to good effect. And another thing that tends to complicate all of this is delayed processing. So as I mentioned with time blocking, if you put in a schedule one day and then you get to it the next day, you don't know what you're going to be dealing with from the day before. You don't know what you will be dealing with from just that morning. There's a lot of things that you can't predict. So time blocking kind of leans into this theory that you can, do a lot more if you predictably outline your time, but you can't predictably outline your emotional state. And so it's just a struggle to try to do that. So that brings us into our third topic, and that is the kind of psychological friction points. So we just talked about some of the biological friction points, but the psychological friction points, the biggest one is going to be PDA. So pathological demand avoidance, or some people call it the pervasive drive for autonomy. Basically, any kind of demands that are placed upon you by someone else, sometimes even placed upon you by yourself, any type of demands like that are going to kind of trigger an avoidance. They're going to try to trigger some kind of behavior that, like, you may be like, oh, I can scroll on my phone, or, oh, I better go dust this, or I've got to go clean the bath. Like, just different things that you don't need to do that moment, but you're going to find a reason not to do the thing you put on the schedule. So a real easy way to explain that is when you get to your time block, like let's say it's at 9 a.m. 9 a.m. is coming up, you're sitting down, and you're looking at what's on your schedule, and basically what's happening is past you shows up and tells present you what they're supposed to do. And it doesn't matter that it's still you telling you what you're supposed to do, but it's going to kind of tend to trigger that demand avoidance because it is still a demand that's been placed upon you, even if you did it yourself in the past and it's just now showing up. So we got to keep that in mind. And we have to keep in mind also how that PDA, how that can really affect executive function and executive dysfunction, and how by that avoidance can kind of create a stack. Like there's things building up, there's things stacking up, there's all of this pressure, and it's just, it's going to weigh you down. It's going to add things that aren't part of your routine. It's going to add new stress. It's just basically unresolved thoughts that keep going and going and going in the back of your mind because you've got all of these things that you didn't do. And every time you avoid them, it's going to kind of magnify that. So that's another issue with time blocking, is that it just tends to trigger some of those PDA behaviors. All right, so we've kind of gone through now different biological and psychological, different friction points that time blocking can present when you're trying to force that kind of scheduling into your life. So I want to offer up something different, a different alternative that's easier and that is much more adaptable on the fly. So I want you to think of all of your tasks, all of your to-do lists, whether it's a daily to-do list or it's just a bunch of random stuff, everything you have on your list. Now, and this is for this isn't just work. This is your list of all things today. So do your life balancing the way you want to do it. You can be mixing these things all throughout the day. You don't have to do work in a schedule. That's just another form of time blocking. So you don't have to time block your work into 9 to 5. You can have that be all day and mixed in with all of your other personal things. And that's what I do. And I honestly think that people should explore that more. I find much more satisfaction mixing my day throughout my day, not just saying this part belongs to work. But I digress. So I want you to look at all of your tasks like menu items. So for example, these menu items are going to allow you to choose based on what your bandwidth is, based on what your energy level is, based on where your body is at, what you're feeling. Like if you're sore, if you're exhausted, you don't want to jump into the main course and dig into something that's going to just require a lot from you. You don't have that kind of energy, and you don't have that kind of, you just don't have the bandwidth right now. So break things apart into 4 categories. The first one is appetizers. Appetizers are going to be super easy, repetitive tasks that you can do on repeat just about every day without any thought. So one of the things that I do is I take some videos and I repost them every day. That's it takes a couple of minutes each time, and it's just clicks. It's just repeating the same clicks over and over. It's something that's easy for me to do without any real thought. And what these appetizers are doing, the point of the appetizer is to get a little bit of momentum, to build an easy win, to start your day with some kind of tiny victory that says, I have achieved something, and you get a tiny little, kick a dopamine or whatever it is that just says, hey, here's a tiny little bit of feel good. And it's also the first check on your checklist. Getting that first check on your checklist is huge. We talked about autistic inertia, and you got to build momentum, and that's what appetizers are for. So then we go into your main dish. So we kind of talked about that a moment ago. These are your heavy items, your big projects, the things that you have to really put all of your attention into. So these are your bullfrogs. You may have heard the saying, if you have to, if you have to eat a bullfrog, eat it first thing in the morning or something like that. Basically, attack the biggest thing, the most important thing here. When you've got your energy, when you've got, you're talking about the time of the day, when you figured out what time of day is best for you to do your heavy work, that's where your main course goes. That's your big next thing. That's, if you're writing a book, if you're creating an online course, if you're making videos, whatever it may be, your main course is that. So save that for when you're at your peak, productivity, your peak energy, however you want to look at it. It's when you do your best work is when you should attack your main courses. So then you have side dishes. Side dishes are kind of like vegetables. They're a lot of times not very exciting. They can be boring, but they're things that have to be done, and they often have high value. And so you've got to squeeze them in somewhere. And so with your side dishes, my favorite way to do them is to attach them to something else that's enjoyable. So it may be, for example, I used to run, I still compost in my yard, but whenever I need to compost and turn my composting pile, I will go out there and I'll put on an audiobook, and I will just grab a pitchfork and a shovel and start digging in the compost. And it goes by so much quicker, even when I don't feel like being out there, because I'm being entertained the whole time. So kind of like with your vegetables as a kid, if you got to hide them in some like potatoes or something that you do like, that's kind of how you look at your side dishes. So that could be, trying to think of some kind of so cleaning. Could be organizing your desk. It could be cleaning your house. It could be folding laundry. All of those tasks that don't tend to provide a whole lot of excitement, just add those in with some potatoes, just like you would your vegetables. Add them in with something that's a little bit more enjoyable and exciting, and those things go by quickly. So we've got our appetizers, our main courses, our side dishes, and the last one is desserts. Desserts are where I love to be. So I try to get there as fast as I can, because dessert is like your deep dive. It's your falling into the rabbit hole and just running down whatever is just piquing your interest at that moment. Desserts are all reward. And I say that, but desserts also tend to feed what comes next. So these aren't like wastes of time. Now, you may be able to call like playing a video game or something a dessert, but I'm talking more like if you're suddenly obsessed with Wing Chun Kung Fu and you just have to learn all of the forms in like a week, or if you figured out that you really enjoy acrylic painting and you just can't put the brush down for a week, you dive down a hole, you figure out like what you're interested in, you just chase it, and you're just in kind of pure creativity mode. This isn't something that these desserts aren't something that you ever owe to anyone. This isn't like regular work. This is all you, for you, And that's why they're dessert. Like they tend to be pushed off because, you've got to eat your vegetables first. You've got to eat your protein and all of that, your main course. But the desserts really are kind of what pays for what comes next. They're where you put so much of your creativity and your energy that most of the sparks and the ideas tend to come from things that are related to what you had for your desserts. So how do you put all this together? Well, here's how it works. You wake up, and the first thing you should be doing once you're kind of into you maybe grab a cup of coffee or whatever, but fairly quickly, you should get an assessment of where you are, where your body is, where your mind is, how much bandwidth you have. Like, are you in a green light, go full speed ahead kind of mode, or are you more yellow where you're like, yesterday was rough, I better take it a little easier today? Or you could be full red where yesterday was brutal, or, this week was brutal, or maybe you put in 2 weeks of 12-hour shifts or something, and it's just caught up to you and you're just fried. So that's how you know what to choose from your menu. That's how you know whether generally you're going to want to start with an appetizer just to get the momentum going. So that's those easy tasks that build momentum really quickly. But from there forward, you might not have a main course that day. You might not have the bandwidth. If it's a red day or even a yellow day, you might not have the bandwidth to choose from the main course menus. So you may be in a day full of appetizers and desserts and bouncing back and forth. And that's fine. But all of the other days, your consistency, your routine, those will pay for the red days. All of the green and the yellow days, the days where you do all of, your normal work and you're not too challenged, you may get a little tired, whatever. Keeping routine on those days will pay for the red days. So don't worry when you have red days. And that's what the appetizers are for. Those are those little daily tasks that don't really feel great, but they get the job done. They keep everything afloat until you're feeling in a better mood. So that's really what we're trying to do. That's why I suggest the menu approach more so than time blocking, because what the menu approach does is it lets you look at yourself in the moment. It lets you say, what do I want to do right now? What am I going to do this moment? Instead of, what my past self decided I should do at this moment. Because just like your boss doesn't know how you're going to feel next Tuesday at 10:15 in the morning, you don't really know how you're going to feel next Tuesday at 10:15 in the morning. Now you get a better idea than your boss, but you need to understand that deciding in advance how you will be and how you will feel is going to eventually lead to issues. What's going to be much more effective and more productive for you is if instead you go in with options and you assess where you're at and you feed yourself based on those options. You choose the items that, match the way you're feeling at that moment. And as long as you can do that and just keep a little bit of momentum, that's the biggest thing with autistic inertia. If you have the tiniest bit of momentum, that is so much better than having zero momentum. Zero momentum would be like a burnout, or being totally just fried one day and just staring at a wall for 2 hours. That's what you want to avoid. That's where those appetizers help. They help you get going. And that's kind of how I approach my day. I say, hey, I'm feeling this way, I can get this done today. Or, hey, I'm feeling this way, I don't think this is the day for this, but I'm gonna put some energy into this smaller thing over here instead. And by doing that, and by being intentional, and by assessing how you feel instead of how you think you should feel, you will get so much more done in the long run, I promise you. I'm gonna cut it there. Thank you for joining me. Enjoy your day.